All right, here we go.
Time for the Sunshine State Showdown, covering every top sports story in the state of Florida, from South Beach to the state capitol and everything in between. And now, without further ado, your hosts, Brandon Kravitz and Zach Blobner.
The week just keeps on trucking. Welcome into the Sunshine State Showdown, covering all the biggest sports topics percolating in the Sunshine State. We are your hosts, Brandon Kravitz and Zach Blobner. He's the MJ of the Bay. I think I might stick with that for a few days. On air all across the
salt
state.
In the stream. We're getting red assault in the stream already.
Yeah. Well, I like. I'm just gonna, back and forth. People aren't over this MJ thing, so I'm trying to milk that. We're on in Orlando, Miami, Jacksonville in the house.
Duba!
Find us streaming on iHeart, Facebook, and Twitter. We are digitally advanced on this show. We got a great show planned for you today. Ben Murphy, First Coast News in Jacksonville, will be hopping on in about 30 minutes. And that, my friends, is the housekeeping. Zach, I saw that Bleacher Report tweeted at you about, 15 hours ago. What was that about? Are you famous? Are you more famous than I give you credit for?
Look, man, I got a lot of ties in a lot of places. I've had Game of Thrones tweet at me. I've had Westworld tweet at me. I like to find the accounts that are interactive. I'll be honest. And if they are, I try to engage with them. Chipotle, like Moe's, like I've had the most random Twitter accounts of me have, conversations. But I think that's what's great about Twitter. Like, who would have ever thought that I could talk to a burrito, or a sports site, like an entity?
I don't think the burrito's doing the tweeting, but I also don't want to be the guy that bursts your bubble on a Tuesday.
Whoa, dude, right. Let's wrap this up. You know what I'm saying? Burrito jokes.
I hear you.
No, so it's a lot of fun. That happens. Now I just need to get real people to tweet at me. At Zach on the mic, by the way, at Brandon Kravitz. You can see our Twitter handles below.
Yeah, you got that right. I was actually looking at some old iCloud photos over the weekend, and one of the ones that I'd saved was a screenshot of Michael Irvin tweeting at me. I had said something about Jameis Winston heading into the 2015 draft, not about him as a player, but I remember it being a story. I only remember this because of the tweet that I sent out, that Michael Irvin, for some reason, I angered him. I incensed him. Was about how Jameis and Mariota both decided to stay home and not go to the draft and walk across the stage. They wanted to be with their entire families. Sort of ironic given what this year's draft was. Yeah. But I said, who cares? Who blames them? This is about family. This isn't about, the NFL. And Michael Irvin, I just pissed him off. He said, no, the NFL is family. What do you know? You've never played in the league. And I'm like, well, I can't really argue with there, Michael. But yeah, so, that's, I don't know if that's better than a burrito, but it's something.
Yeah, well, I mean, you remember when things like that happen. I've had an interaction with Sergeant Slaughter, WWE fame. I know we get some wrestlers. John Cena randomly followed me one day.
Is he still, or is he figured that out by now?
No, I guess. You know what? The problem is he doesn't know he's following me. You know why? Because he can't see me, dog.
It's not going to get any better than that. Time for the opening round. Speaking of social media and beef on social media, man, that was a transition I didn't plan. Devontae Parker and Michael Thomas, wide receiver for the Dolphins and the best wide receiver in the NFL, currently playing for the New Orleans Saints. Got into it.
I'm sorry, pause. What? No, that's an opinion. Arguably the best receiver.
Statistically, he is the best wide receiver in the NFL and has been for the last 2 years. Numbers back it up.
Add your adjectives. You better add your adjectives.
Is there anybody else playing in the NFL that holds the record for receptions in a single season, or is it just Michael Thomas?
I will take DeAndre Hopkins today, right now.
Yeah, he's so good. The Texans said, we'll take David Johnson and a bag of Doritos.
Don't start. Okay. Anyways, DVP and Michael Thomas.
Dude, he's picking on my guy, Devontae Parker. I'm in the tank. I love Michael Thomas. I love both of these guys. These are my These are my in a keeper league. These are my two receivers, man. I've got some infighting. This is what happens when you win a championship.
Every parent has a favorite child, though, so you got to pick a side.
Well, if I had to pick, I'd take Michael Thomas, but that's just because he's going to support me when I get old. He'll get me in the nursing home. Devontae Parker, I've had to bail out of, he's the child that you love, you have fun with, but the principal will call you every once in a while and be like, hey, your kid's acting up again. That's Devontae Parker.
So
you want me to tell you the story or what?
Please, I was gonna say, because we have to approach this from two angles. A, the actual story, what originated the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because there's a debate in that.
Yeah.
And then B, which person was reacting, more in good faith? Like which one had more of a right to react the way they did after the fact?
So this all started when Fox NFL posted on Instagram, which is tougher, making a catch while guarded by Stephon Gilmore, cornerback of the Patriots, or breaking up a pass while guarding Michael Thomas. Not anything that either of us or any of our listeners could probably do, but that was the question, and a good one posed by Fox NFL. Parker commented and selected A. All he commented was A, but A signified that he was selecting Stephon Gilmore, making a catch while guarded by Stephon Gilmore. And Michael Thomas then clapped back at him and essentially said, you were a first rounder. I've lapped you. And Parker replies, let me get targeted 300 times in a game. So that's the Cliff's Notes version of it. Which side are you on? We'll start with the beef side of Devontae Parker, Michael Thomas, and who's more in the right as far as the spat goes.
Well, first of all, I don't feel like DVP was going after Michael Thomas in any capacity. I think he was voicing his opinion. It seemed very harmless. And clearly he had that last game against the Patriots where he torched Stephon Gilmore. So, yeah, it makes sense for him to pick that. With that being said, I feel like it's always easier to be the offensive player than the defensive player because you're going to get more leverage. You know what you're doing on the routes. The defender doesn't. They're trying to anticipate. They're more likely to get called and flagged for penalties. So I think in general, yeah, it's probably easier to, make a catch against Stephon Gilmore than it is to break up a pass against Michael Thomas. Just again, from a
then you're disagreeing.
Well,
then you're disagreeing with Devontae Parker because the question was which is tougher, and he was saying that it's tougher to make a catch against Stephon Gilmore.
But I think it was harmless, though. I don't think he was going after Michael.
Oh, he wasn't. I mean, all he said was A. It wasn't like he.
Correct.
It wasn't like he tagged Michael Thomas or was like, "Oh, that guy's a bum." Easy question. If he had said something like that,
reacted.
Oh,
Michael Thomas is like, "What'd you say about my mama?" And it's like, "Whoa, dude! Nobody brought nobody into this. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, I mean, he kind of went off the rails. I'm gonna pull up the tweet and see if I can shed any more light on the.
I'm pretty sure. Was it on Twitter or Instagram?
Well, I have the screenshot on Twitter, but yeah, it did happen on Instagram.
As you're pulling it up, so basically, and there was at one point where Michael Thomas said something, and DVP just was like, all right, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it die. You take the last word, we're good. And Michael Thomas said something under that to incite more debate and conversation. He came at him again and was like, yeah, you better stay quiet. And it's like, dude, like, leave it alone. Like, are you that bored, Michael Thomas? And the other thing we have to point out, Brandon, no matter which side of these guys you're on for this debate, they are both mad sensitive on social media. They probably both tweet and talk way too much for their own good.
I know Michael Thomas does. I see him all the time. I mean, this guy
fans a lot too. I've seen it.
Michael Thomas constantly has this chip on his shoulder and is obviously he does take some of this and put it out onto the field. The guy's been more productive than any receiver in the league the last couple of years. He's led the league in receptions the last 2 seasons, so he's been great. But he clearly carries this chip on his shoulder and voices it on social media. I see it all the time with a variety of different issues. And so Devontae Parker said he made that 300 times a game comment. So again, I think Devontae Parker, not only he's not attacking Michael Thomas, he's also being kind of funny, obviously very sarcastic, saying he gets targeted 300 times a game. Nobody gets targeted that much. And then Michael Thomas replied and said, in other words, you weak. They don't even put your name in the same sentence as me. Remember that. And then and continued to say, you're still not going to do anything. It took you 6 years and 17 weeks to have a good game. Now, I resent that because he was really good the second half of the season. So clearly, Thomas, not a Devontae Parker owner in fantasy football. But interesting when you line those two up. I mean, he is right. When you look at the tail of the tape. So I went back and I looked at the stats that these guys have compiled over the course of their career. Parker was drafted a year before Michael Thomas. He was in that 2015 draft, and he was drafted it was 14th overall by the Miami Dolphins. Since then, he has amassed 234 catches, 3,419 yards and 18 touchdowns. So remember those numbers. 234 as far as the catch rate, over 3,000 yards receiving and 18 touchdowns. Michael Thomas taken pick 47 in 2016 in the second round, 470 catches, 5,512 yards and 32 touchdowns. So blowing him out of every single category with a year less under his belt. So even though Michael Thomas is being incredibly sensitive here, he is also dead on accurate. He has lapped Devontae Parker.
Nobody's going to argue that Michael Thomas isn't the better receiver, because he is. He's the better receiver. With that being said, though, let's not act like the deck isn't, and it hasn't been stacked against Devontae Parker in multiple ways. Clearly, when you're catching balls from Drew Brees on a very good team in New Orleans, we know that the running back situation has been solidified for the last couple of years as well for them. So it takes off the pressure of just having a passing game. And I know last year was a little different, but nonetheless, and you don't really have any like secondary weapons, you're gonna ball even if you're only an okay receiver. Michael Thomas is above average, so that's why he has those numbers. I'm not taking anything away from him, and I think even if Devontae Parker and him flip-flopped, I'd still say Michael Thomas is the better receiver based on what I know and have physically watched. However, there is a lot of things working against Devontae Parker that Michael Thomas hasn't had to go up against.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I would say in the defense of the Michael Thomas argument, and he's got a much more plush situation, Devontae Parker was playing with Ryan Tannehill for a couple of years, and now we've seen Ryan Tannehill made a star out of A.J. Brown, or vice versa. You know, so a lot of this is, yes, no, even if they were to play the same amount of time with the same quarterback, Devontae Parker's done a lot that hasn't helped his own situation. And that's where a lot of this is on him. He should have always been better and producing more than what he's been able to do. This is why, as a Dolphin fan, I was so excited with what I saw last year, because he finally popped. That was the guy. He looked like a first-round pick. This wasn't just somebody that was mucking up stats at the end of a year that didn't matter. This was somebody that was clearly a force early in games that the team had chosen. We're going to get this guy involved early, and when they did that, it paid off, and he was much more focused. Now he got paid. Can he be the same guy? All of those questions exist, but you got to love what you saw from him last year. So real quick, Zach, I want to pivot to this. The Dolphins, in a much more serious light than some silly Instagram beef, the Dolphins could be moving up in the 2021 draft. Some 16 spots if the latest Rooney Rule proposal sees the light of day. I would assume that if this passes, that they would reap the benefit of it. They have a black coach and a black general manager, and they would have both been in that position for at least 2 years. This is what the new proposal is. NFL owners will soon vote on a new addition to the Rooney Rule, where teams would receive draft compensation for hiring and retaining minority coaches and general managers. Any team that hires a minority coach will be rewarded by having its third-round pick the following year, before the coach's second season, improved by 6 places. A team that hires a minority general manager will see that same pick move 10 spots. So if you've got both, you're moving up a total of 16 whole picks. This is going to be voted on, and the reports I'm reading are that it's probably going to be passed. This to me sounds... It's tough for me to make sense of this. This almost reminds me of the health and safety protocols that we saw with Major League Baseball, where I just, this falls in your lap and you go, what am I supposed to do with this? This is a lot of different things. To me, number one above everything else, it is sad in today's day and age that we even need to think about putting a rule like this into place.
It is sad, but clearly what they're doing isn't working. There's 3 African-American coaches in the league right now. Mike Tomlin, who was brought in and talked to because of the Rooney Rule, it worked out. It worked in his favor. We know Anthony Lynn with the Chargers certainly gets somewhat of a fresh start. His defense is very good, very well put together. And now they have Justin Herbert on the offensive side of things. And then the third one you mentioned down in Miami is Brian Flores, who similar to Anthony Lynn, kind of gets a fresh start with a younger quarterback. And they're like, oh, let's see what you can do with an improving defense from that side of the ball. So that's not really enough. We've seen other times in the league when there's been more minority coaches involved. Certainly Ron Rivera in Washington is on the same, page as far as being one of them. I think that this is necessary, though. And it does sound crazy. I'll admit it. And here's the craziest part to me about it. The owners are the ones that would vote to put this in place. They're also the ones that make the decisions.
Right.
So, if you're the owners and you're voting on this, you're aware that it's an issue. why don't you just personally fix it when you're hiring people? Like, why do you have to make a rule to do this? Just as the owners like shake hands and say, you know what, we're going to interview, we're going to do all these things anyways, right? Without the incentive, then everybody wins. Like, that's the crazy part to me. And I've been very heavy on this morning because for me, Brandon, the thing that I continue to focus on, and there are different cases, and it's not fair because I don't know the intricacies of the interview process or how it's went for certain guys. But when you have people like Joe Judge as a special teams coordinator from New England getting hired on, you got Zach Taylor in Cincy. What was he, a quarterback coach? And he knew Sean McVay. And then the other guy, which is Matt LaFleur in Green Bay. Like, these guys all have jobs, and it's no knock on them. But Eric Bieniemy is in a position where Doug Peterson, Matt Nagy have gotten hired from being a part of that Andy Reid coaching tree. And that's just the most recent two. We've seen Andy Reid's coaching tree extend far beyond that. For Eric Bieniemy to not get an opportunity, despite being that OC of a Super Bowl winning team now, having that experience grooming Patrick Mahomes and allowing him to flourish with his skill set on display, and you're telling me that he's not hired somewhere yet? That, to me, especially when I saw Joe Judge specifically get brought on in New York, is where I had to pump the brakes and say, listen, I don't care what they do to fix this. It is broken to the point where it has to be drastically changed. And this is a drastic change. Now, I don't think that per se somebody's going to get hired only because they get to move up your team several draft spots, Brandon. I don't believe in that. I do believe, though, that it'll at least entice these owners to interview seriously these candidates like the Eric Bieniemys, like the Byron Leftwich's is in Tampa Bay, the OC here at the Bucs facility. I think that that's a good thing. And if it leads to at least owners taking the job hiring process more seriously for minorities, it's a good thing. We'll all learn to live with the third round jumps. It won't last forever. It's just to help us get it more on track with what should already be happening in 2020.
I mean, it's not the end of the world if that happens. And
No.
you know, I think one of the examples too that brought this to light, that you brought up a lot of really good examples, was the firing of Steve Wilkes in Arizona, and then the hiring of Cliff Kingsbury, who was an unsuccessful college football coach. And
he had just gotten fired.
It doesn't.
I mean, he was hired as an OC or whatever at USC, but he had just gotten fired from his real job.
It's ridiculous. And you're right. Eric Bieniemy should be a head coach if that's what he wants to do. Now, I don't know. I would assume that that's the case. You assume that these coordinators want to be head coaches. And if that's the case, it doesn't make any sense for him not to be one. I like where their head's at. I think sometimes you can try and do the right thing and do it in the wrong way. And I think that that's the best way I can summarize what I see. I don't like the idea of compensation to hire a minority candidate. I do think that they should be more involved in the interview process and then let that play itself out. But I mean, I'm not pretending like I have the answers. I fully admit that it's a problem. I hate that it's a problem. It shocks me that in 2020 this is still an issue. I just don't think that this is necessarily the way to correct it, because I think it, quite frankly, I find it embarrassing. I find it embarrassing.
You want it to be organic.
Yeah.
You want it to be natural. Well, guess what? It's not going to be organic, and it's not going to be natural. We know that. So unfortunately, we have to accept the reality. And if there is a drastic thing, I think it was Bomani Jones. I heard him say earlier this morning on the situation. He goes, I'd rather be a guy that had to get incentivized to get a job than the dude without a job, right? Like, at the end of the day, you're right. It's not ideal, but trust me, I don't think any coach is going to be like, well, they had to give the team a third-round pick for me to get hired. They're going to be like, no, I'm hired. I'm happier than if I wouldn't have been hired 7 days a week.
Yeah. Tweet us. Let us know what you think at Brandon Kravitz, at Zach on the mic. Right around the corner, a quick update as the Bucs continue, or actually begin, to practice with one another. Tom Brady and who else made it? Zach will give you the report on that one next.
Rain or shine, these guys have you covered. Now back to the Sunshine State Showdown with Brandon Kravitz and Zach Blobner.
The Sunshine State Showdown keeps on rolling. Remember, if you missed the show live, you can easily find the podcast uploaded daily on iHeartRadio. Just search Sunshine State Showdown on iHeart. You can also find the video stream on all of our social accounts from our wonderful affiliates at 96.9 The Game, at 940 Wins, and at The Game Jacks. So this is a story that Zach brought to my attention prior to the show, and that is that some of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been seen practicing with one another. Tom Brady officially out on the practice field, which is great to see and great to hear with some of his teammates. What's the latest on that one, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is if we're very visual people, we're a visual country, and you have Tom Brady for the first time, to our knowledge, in a Buccaneers helmet. And that was pretty cool. He's wearing the orange practice jersey on top of it, giving us an idea of what the creamsicle life would be like for one Tom Brady if it ever existed. He had some receivers out there with him as well. Before I throw that list at you, this was done at a prep school. It was very tucked away. It was private. There's been nobody on this prep school's campus for months now because of the pandemic. And Tom Brady did it around 7 a.m. So it makes you feel like he was really trying to gauge which of his new teammates were on board to really get this work in. Now, we don't know the specifics. Maybe some guys are out of town. Maybe some guys didn't even get an opportunity. They didn't get the offer from Tom to come out and practice. The most notable name, top two notable names not there, not in attendance, Rob Gronkowski, who we know Brady is the most comfortable with. He was not there. And Chris Godwin, one of his star new receivers, also not on board. But that doesn't mean that there weren't star power talent level guys there. OJ Howard and Cameron Brate, your next two tight ends, were in attendance. You also had Mike Evans on board. The only offensive lineman there, the center, Ryan Jensen, a guy obviously who needs to get on the same page of Brady before the rest of the O-line, being that he snaps the ball to TB12. He was there doing the snaps, as were the backup quarterbacks, both Blaine Gabbert and Ryan Griffin, I assume, to help Brady, watch how some routes work out from another angle and also give him pointers on how Bruce's offense works. None of the coaches were there. There were no personnel like that. The most interesting part overall for me, Brandon, the running backs, or lack thereof, that showed up to this secret practice this morning for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, their first together. Dare Ngumbawale, the only back that actually came to practice and play. And he's a guy who you don't think of first, you don't think of second, and really a lot of times you might not think of at all. You might not even know he's on the roster. He's a guy, though, that blocks very well, that Bruce Arians likes a lot. Ronald Jones Jr., who's expected to be the lead back, was not in attendance. Also behind him, you have Keyshawn Vaughn, the rookie out of Vanderbilt, not in attendance. Tristan Wirfs, the rookie lineman drafted in the first round for the Bucs, not there. Rookies I give a pass to, right? Though those guys are probably still at home. They don't even know when they're going to be able to get to Tampa. His realm of moving and all these other things. They don't have the money that Tom Brady does to just rent Derek Jeter's house. So I give them a pass. We're not seeing Rojo there and Chris Godwin, though. Gronk, maybe he doesn't need it. Good to see all the other guys. The last name I forgot to mention, Scotty Miller, was the other receiver there, the rookie out of Bowling Green from last year, now a sophomore.
So two thoughts on this. As you know, when you say you give a pass, it means there's a part of you that's judging those that were not in attendance. And I think that there's an easy out here. I've got two questions that you may know the answer to, and you guys at DAE may have discussed this morning as you come through all the different angles. I am under the assumption that not everybody on the list of guys that were not there live in Tampa. Do we know, just because you play in Tampa, that you might have a place there, but it doesn't mean that that's where you live in the off season? We would expect that there's not any travel going on for those individuals. So if you are not currently based in Tampa in the month of May, I wouldn't expect you to be there. So that's the first thing. Can you respond to that? Do you know the answer?
Yeah, well, that's partially why I do give the rookies a pass, because I would assume out of all the players that aren't in town, it's the guys that just got drafted, right? They don't have a place to live yet. They don't even know what's going on. So I would assume for sure, the Keyshawn Vaughns, I mentioned Tristan Wirfs, I would assume that that's their reasoning for not being at these practices. Ronald Jones Jr. did go to college. I keep calling him Junior the second. He went to college at USC. So he's a California guy. He could easily be West Coast. I wouldn't be shocked if that were the case. However, again, if you're Rojo, you need to be in town trying to find ways to get on the same page as Brady. And we don't know the specifics. Chris Godwin, he certainly has been in town for the most part. Now he might have been he went to Penn State. Maybe he was up in the Pennsylvania area. I don't know. But for the most part, he's been in Tampa this whole time. Gronkowski, I know he doesn't live here yet in the Tampa Bay area, but he's a 24/7 champ. How much traveling has he done to Florida for WWE? Like,
that was one event. He went to one event.
But maybe he's the guy that doesn't. I don't think he needs the practice with Brady either, though. I think Gronk's the one that Brady's like, no, you're good for now. We're good.
You could always use practice, but so I give a pass because I don't know where these guys are at. The other thing that is the most obvious, glaring, let's give everybody that wasn't there a complete pass is that you notice there's a lot of names missing off of that list. Well, you can't gather in groups of more than 10. Still, isn't that still a thing? So
okay. I would doesn't that make it even more interesting for the guys that were picked? I mean, Scotty Miller over Chris Godwin, Dare and Ogunbowale over any other running back in the world. Like, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
I'll give you the Dare thing. The rest of it is, I would imagine that Tom Brady.
Both backup quarterbacks?
I'm picturing.
You have 9 slots, and you use 2 of them on backup quarterbacks. Come on, man.
They got to be there rubbing shoulders with Brady. I would imagine that Brady's like, all right, this is going to be phase 1. And then we're going to bring guys in for phase 2. Some of that's schedule dependent. It's not all about your pecking order in the roster. It's your availability. Yeah. I give a pass to everybody. Zach is so hypercritical on this.
I would be wounded. I would be emotionally hurt if I was phase 2 or 3. I'd be like, you called Dare over me?
Yeah. Hey, Dare's a guy quickly climbing up the board in fantasy football rankings for being the guy invited to this little powwow. So there's your Tampa Bay report. Right around the corner, Ben Murphy, First Coast News in Jacksonville. He stepped into the hornet's nest that is UCF Twitter. We'll talk to him about that one next.
Welcome back to the show.
Nope. Oops.
Welcome back to the Showdown with your hosts, Brendan Kravitz and Zach Blobner.
What? Did we just become best friends? Yep.
Time for some added insight. Let's head to the Sunshine State Hotline.
I know when that hotline blink.
Ben Murphy, First Coast News sports anchor. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Murphy TV. Ben has stepped into the hornet's nest known as UCF Twitter. I'll give you the quote that had you spending your weekend chatting with UCF's faithful.
Let's talk about it, baby. Come on.
If UCF gets to 100,000 students on campus, they could finally fill a stadium made out of tinfoil. So how much time did that tweet take out of your life there, Zach? Or not Zach, but Ben?
Turned off my phone. I couldn't deal with it. It was a Saturday, wasn't it? It was a Saturday, yeah. I didn't. No, I love those guys. I love them. It's all fun and games. Look, my thing with the UCF, the whole UCF situation was this. They've got a great football program. It's a great university, but when Florida offers you a 2-for-1 deal to play 2 games in Gainesville and 1 game in Orlando, and you go and turn it down, you're not allowed to talk anymore. The offer was on the table. Florida doesn't need to play UCF to make a run to the playoff, but UCF needs to beat a school like Florida or Florida State to get their name over that hump, and I think that's where all the beef really comes from. But it's all.
I'm with you, Ben. I'm going to let Brandon do this because literally your exact argument I've made with Brandon. Brandon is the UCF Twitter to my Gator argument. So I'm going to let Brandon talk to you because I'm with you, man.
But here's
accept that 2-for-1.
Here's the reason why. I understand where you are coming from. That's not an asinine thing to say, like most on Twitter would tell you that it is. But there's a reason why that doesn't happen. UCF has found high-level Power 5 competition to go 1-for-1 with them. So they're not going to then say, this is our standard. Oh, wait, it's Florida? Never mind. We're going to change our standard of operation. They're not going to do that. They have a way of doing it. They say, this is how we do it. This is how we're going to do it. Power 5 schools like Stanford have agreed to that. Pitt agreed to that. UNC agreed to that. South Carolina has agreed to that. There's no reason for them to then go, but it's Florida, so let's change the way that we do things. That's the reason. Even though I understand what you're saying, you want to get into the college football playoff, you got to play whoever you can get your hands on. But if you're talking about it from a business standpoint, UCF does not need to stoop any lower than the standard they've created for themselves, even if those on the outside think it's ridiculous.
I would just say the difference between as far as a competition level that we can talk about, Stanford versus Florida, South Carolina versus Florida is one thing. But I think within the state level, look, if you play 3 games against Florida and you win, okay, let's say you win 1 or you compete in 1 or 2 of those 3, you've changed the complexion of how a lot of the kids you recruit in the state view it. Because I think for UCF to be a consistent power and make a push to the playoff, they need the depth. They need the depth and the talent, and the way to do that is recruit in your state, and the way to recruit in your state is to, battle the big boys in your state because they've got the skill players, they've got the speed, but the depth comes with those boys in the trenches, and there's only so many 6'5", 270-pound defensive ends to go around in the state. And when you can maybe leverage a win out of the 3 that you play, or compete in 2, win 2, whatever it may be. As far as results go, I think when it's within your state, there's a lot. It can do a lot for your program, and there's a lot more for Florida to lose than there is for them to gain having to play a 1-on-1. For UCF, if they win, they gain a lot more. But if Florida loses, it hurts them more than it would benefit them to win. So I think that's why Florida's pretty sturdy on that 2-for-1 stance, and because they understand, like, look, UCF's a real threat in the state. Them boys can play, but you got a lot more to lose if you lose that game than you do to actually win if you win, because if you win, it's like, well, they should have won. And that's how it's going to go. But if you lose, then you know how the tables turn.
Well, and so, I mean, this is obviously a much more sensible conversation than the one that I saw you having on Twitter. If you get bored today, by the way, out there, go comb through Ben's Twitter account. It's highly entertaining. But would you at least agree with the stance of, if just generally, if you say that this is my stance, this is my standard, you don't bend for anybody. That's the thing that I've always respected about Danny White's decision to say we will sign deals 1-for-1, and they're not going to budge on that. Just like if Florida said, that's why we're stuck in the middle, and there's no winning in this argument for anybody. Florida's saying we're going to do 2-for-1. UCF is saying we'll do 1-for-1, and they're getting deals that they like. There's no reason for them to then say we're going to change the way that we operate. It would be the same thing for us. If you're saying I'm Ben Murphy, I will not spend more than $10 on a cheeseburger, and then tomorrow you spend $15, your word means nothing.
Yeah, no, and I respect the game from Danny White. I respect it, but I think the difference is Florida's ground that they're standing on, if they're not budging, is still allowing them to get in the playoff. UCF so far hasn't proven that the ground that they're standing on can get them over the hump. So the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And if you want that result to be an entrance into the college football playoff, you're going to have to change the way you go about it. And I think if you can beat a top 10 team, because unfortunately Stanford, UNC, and South Carolina aren't in the top 10, top 15 in that conversation. Not to say they won't be when they play, but if you want to get into the playoff, you got to knock off of Georgia, Bama, Florida State. Well, not right now for Florida State, but and to be a conversation, you gotta take off one of those boys.
Yeah, look, to Brandon's point, UCF, I get it. They're very big on their standards. Like, for instance, they don't have to win the national championship to be a national champion. So by those accounts, yeah, why play Florida? You can claim whatever you want whenever you want.
Listen, guys, first of all, let's be honest here. Let's play out this scenario, okay? Not last season, because that fell apart for UCF, but the 2 seasons prior for UCF.
Oh, we're just gonna ignore last season. Okay, go ahead.
Well, because they had no chance of making. There wasn't even an argument for the college football playoff. So what Ben is saying and what Zach I think is agreeing with is that UCF should play Florida because a win against Florida will propel them potentially into the college football playoff discussion. If you add a Florida win to UCF's schedule, not last year, but the 2 years prior, they still don't get in. So you're chasing a ghost. That's the problem for UCF. So rather than chase a ghost, just stick to your standards. That's why I agree. If they were undefeated in 2017. They were one of the best teams in the country. They were ranked 12th going into bowl season. A win against Florida doesn't push you into the top 4. It doesn't.
Well, it might now if Florida's in the top 4. I mean, that 2017 season, to be honest, I'd have to look it up and see what their out of conference schedule was, but I can probably tell you they didn't have a top 10 win in the regular season.
Correct. You're correct. Yeah.
If they did, it was probably Memphis. And the issue with when your top ranked win is Memphis, what ends up happening is if UCF's 10-0 and Memphis is 9-1 and UCF's ranked 11th and Memphis is ranked, we'll call it 16th or 17th, and UCF beats Memphis, now Memphis isn't ranked. And that's no fault to UCF. It's an unfortunate standard that they play by because of their strength of schedule, or what the perception of their strength of schedule is based on everything else that goes around. But there's only one way to fix that. No, they've definitely made a right start lining up South Carolina, UNC. It's definitely a trend in the right direction. And again, I don't necessarily fault Danny White for going away from his standard, but if he wants to get over the hump and create some depth within the state and maybe get themselves within the conversation, it's not going to hurt to line up against the team in Gainesville 3 times.
Absolutely. Let's pivot a little bit here.
Fans aren't going to make the trip. They'd love to make the trip to Gainesville. Florida fans in Gainesville, alumni in Orlando would love to see Florida play once at the Bounce House or the Camping World, wherever they're going to line up.
Not Bounce House. Not Bounce House. And Camping World's the only option. And Camping World, no Bounce House.
They can play there. It's fine. There's plenty of room. Okay, 45,000 seats, plenty of seats. Here's the end of let's just capsulize it here, and then Zach, let's pivot. Let's just go somewhere else.
Some golf.
I understand. You want to talk golf? This great foursome from over the weekend is that it is hilarious to see Florida fans and UCF fans going at each other and bickering constantly on social media about something that both fan bases want to see happen. That is the irony of all of this, is that both fans want it to happen, yet both are telling the other how stupid they are. That's how ridiculous all of this is at the end of the day.
I was talking about that earlier. I mean, if we could all sign up for a one and done neutral site, we would. But I guess it just doesn't make sense financially for either side. And again, with the with the whole argument of what do we have to lose? Well, Florida's got more to lose on one end, and maybe UCF wants to play a home and home and get it on the other end. It's a one game neutral site pop would be fun, and who knows, maybe we'll get it in a bowl game down the line. But to open the season, I think that would be a fun little showdown in Camping World or Tampa, wherever they want to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gators did just play Miami to start the season in Orlando not too long ago. So it's certainly something that could be seen. I'm going to go to golf, though, whether you guys will let me or not. Obviously, it's one of the sports that's actually back in action in some capacity. So I got a two-parter here for you, Ben. I know you're a big golf fan. We have the match coming up this weekend with Tom Brady and Phil Mickelson against Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning, which is certainly going to be a lot of fun. Your thoughts on that? And now that we've seen golf without fans and how they could potentially do this moving forward with some of their bigger tournaments, what you expect from that realm of sports moving forward?
Yeah, we'll start with the match. I'm really looking forward to it. I think the underlying thing that I'm looking forward to the most is having Peyton Manning mic'd up. I think he's going to be an incredible trash talker. I think the issue with the match last year at Shadow Creek between Tiger and Phil is that those two – okay, so all four of these guys are competitive that are playing in this thing. We know that. But Tiger and Phil are so competitive on the course that they didn't loosen up because they were trying to beat the crap out of each other. They were pretty tight in the match last year. And although we had them mic'd up, the most entertaining part was when we had Charles Barkley talking golf. I think the difference that compared to this is I think Manning and Brady are going to be a hoot. I think they're going to be a great addition to this. I think they're going to be highly entertaining. We've seen Manning play in some pro-ams, and they've got him mic'd up. He's a good time. But for what we saw this weekend, it's a little taste of what it's like without fans watching golf. But I don't think we realize, even watching it on TV, how much of an impact do the fans have on what we see. I think I sent a clip to a buddy the other day. It was the '08 U.S. Open, and Tiger made a 20-footer at Torrey Pines, the famous fist pump, and he high-fived Stevie Williams and just sent it to extra holes against Rocco Mediate. And it did just the roar. Okay, now take that moment and just remove the fans. It's kind of awkward almost having him lose his mind doing a fist pump, and it's just silence. You know what I'm saying? We don't necessarily realize when we watch these major tournaments, whether it's the Masters or the U.S. Open or the Ryder Cup, what have you, how much the kind of aura of it with the fans plays into it. And we're not going to get that. It's going to be very interesting to see. I know we got a little bit of it in the match on Sunday with Fowler and Rory and DJ and Wolf, but it's still not to the same extent. And when it's all in line and what these guys are playing for, it's going to be crickets. He's going to make a putt, and it's going to be like a high school golf match where it's just the kids and the parents around. It'll be very interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. It might be a little awkward at some point, to be honest with you.
All right, Ben, we got to close it down here. No matter how much you stoke the flame in the City Beautiful, we still love you for it. At Ben Murphy TV is where you can follow him or yell at him on Twitter. First Coast News, sports anchor Ben Murphy, every Tuesday at 5:30. Thanks so much, Ben.
Yeah, anytime. I prefer not the latter. Let's keep it to a nice mild chat. Okay. All right. No, you know how it is, boys. Anytime we'll talk to you.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Hey, Zach, Ben knows the game, right? This is, you can't be in this business and not get into those type of arguments at some point in your life.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll be lucky. And, Chris Vasquez will be producing a show you're on and just throw out a take to Florida State Twitter and let them eat you alive for 24 hours.
There you go. Coast to Coast is next.
The Sunshine State Showdown with Brandon Kravitz and Zach Blobner.
Yes, indeed, folks. Visit keepfloridagoing.com. Find out which businesses in the state have opened back up where you can get takeout, get your car serviced, great deals on dining, and all of that. It's keepfloridagoing.com, powered by Contender Claims Consultants, Orlando, Miami, Jacksonville. If you miss our show live, you can find the podcast available daily on the iHeartRadio app. Let's close down the show as we always do, going coast to coast in the state. Oh, that was.
Coast to coast and throws it down.
All right, Zach, take it away from the Bay. What you got?
What up? All right, we're going to start actually with the Miami Heat here because I just saw a story where basically Gary Payton recounted when Shaq almost choked out Pat Riley. Apparently the two didn't get along fantastically during their Miami days at the same time. If Shaq were to try to choke you out, what would your first way to defend yourself be?
This would be a lot like the way I would defend myself if I was attacked by a bear. I think I would play dead so that he knows he already won. He doesn't need to continue this fight.
So you would flop just like in the NBA. You'd fit in perfectly. I would run as fast as I could. I don't know if that would help because he'd probably chase me down. He's an athletic big guy. Even at this age, I don't know, man.
I know what I would do.
Screwed.
I know. I have this figured out. See, I just had to take a second to think about my defensive scheme. All right, I'm not going to go hack a Shaq because I'll lose that battle unless there's a referee nearby. Then maybe I go that way, but that would be kind of a weird situation. What if I just pretended to be a free throw? Huh? Because he misses those all the time.
Say it to his face. Say it to his face, though.
Nope.
Let's go to the Magic next. Doc Rivers recounted the story where we talked about with Tim Duncan potentially becoming a part of the Magic, adding to the big three when Shaq was there and all the craziness that ensued. He cleared up the story, though. He said the real reason why Tim Duncan didn't join the Magic, although he said he was planning to, was that he had to have at least one last meeting with Greg Popovich, because he respected him that much. And we know that Pop talked him back into coming to San Antonio again and sticking with the Spurs. Do you buy that that's the reason why Duncan didn't become an Orlando Magic player?
Yes. A guy isn't going to not sign with a team because of the sole reason of they don't want your wife or girlfriend to fly with you. That's understood that that's just not the way that it goes. And if it were that big of a point of, if he went back to the team and said, look, I'm going to sign with you guys, but you have to allow this, they'd be like, okay, cool. We had just said that, but we changed our mind anyway because we want you to play here. I've always thought that story is overblown. No, I mean, they won a championship in San Antonio, and Pop is a very convincing guy. I've always thought that that's the reason why.
No, I like drama. I like Netflix mysteries. I'm blaming the airplane story. For the Rays, we're going to pivot over to baseball. I just want to shout out G-Man Choi. It's his birthday today. He's obviously not in the United States right now because we're waiting to see what happens. He's in Korea. He's not playing Korean baseball at the moment, but shout out to G-Man Choi and happy birthday to you. The last one I got for you, Brandon, real quick. Taven Bryant, Jacksonville Jaguars. He's on the list to shed his bust label in 2020. Does he shed that label?
No. The defense for Jacksonville is not going to look anything like what you've seen over the last couple of years, and I am not sold on what I've seen from Taven Bryan. Great in college, not been great in the NFL. Folks, we've been great. You've been great. Are you kidding me? Go check out the podcast found daily on iHeartRadio. I'm Brandon Kravitz. He's Zach Blobner. We're back tomorrow at 5 p.m. with the Sunshine State Showdown.